Thank you very much. We're actually going to partner even at the podium, so I suppose we'll try not to edge one another off.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having us here today to talk to you about our collaboration that we worked together on for developing a funding competition for sensors for in-stream tidal energy. So my name is David Hÿtch. I'm lead technologist for offshore renewables at Innovate UK, and this is Sheila Paterson from the Nova Scotian Government. So I thought we'd keep the agenda fairly simple, just talk about the who, what, why and how we went about our collaboration. So in a minute we'll just talk briefly about each of our organisations, what we did as part of this funding competition, why we decided to do it together and how we went about doing it. So Innovate UK is who I'm representing. And our goal is to accelerate economic growth by stimulating and supporting business-led innovation. So very much focused on the commercialisation aspects of business. And we do that through 3 strands of activity: connecting people, competitively won grant funding, and ancillary business growth and support services.
In Nova Scotia, our ocean sector is crucial. So as a government, what we're looking to do is understand what role the government can and should play in setting the conditions that allow for the success of our ocean research community and industry. Ocean energy is a particular niche, given our tidal resource. So in trying to encourage this responsible development, what we looked at is a fair amount of work with environmental assessment and site characterization, developed legislation, helped to establish FORCE, that's the Test and Demonstration Centre in the Bay of Fundy, and have a generous set of feed-in tariffs. What those are for both the large scale and community scale deployments, and the intent there is to help seek that investment that's required to achieve economic viability in this field. Throughout, we've been partnered very closely with our federal government, as well as provinces, those that have tidal, river, or wave resources, and a multitude of other partners. One such partner being OERA. They're the funder directly associated with this project. It's the Offshore Energy Research Association. They're an independent group that directs a research program for offshore energy and environmental research. So in striving for excellence, we've looked outward. That's a principle that's very much so encouraged by the Galway Statement. Ocean energy, it's a maturing sector. There's activity around the world. And I think we're seeing probably on a weekly basis announcements coming out here and there. Several years ago, we began looking to consult with what has gone well, where are the lessons that are to be learned in other places. Particularly started working quite a bit with the UK, so that consulting with the government on developing their policy and legislation approach, what makes sense there for Nova Scotia. Carried out a number of trade and research missions, developed a little bit of a New Scotland, Old Scotland connection. So what we've seen in terms of private sector is that the technology and the project developers follow where the projects are most likely to be viable. What that means is that there are a number of European developers that are active in Nova Scotia waters. The Canadian industry, the existing industry, has responded by developing some innovations and processes that help with that investigative work and the development there. And we see that there's opportunity for that to grow even further. Last year, this would have been building on previous activity, OERA convened a group of researchers, of industry and developers in order to determine what are the research questions that are most pressing for Canada. What's the sequence and the priority of those research questions, and then looked at where do those align with the questions that are valid in the UK, in the same sector. So along the way, these links have been encouraged by formal MOUs, a few that are mentioned here. It started with a joint statement issued by both Prime Ministers. That type of effort really helps in continuing the collaborative activity, including, for instance, what led to the funding for this particular call. And so in taking a look at why it makes sense for the 2 jurisdictions to do something that is so aligned, we sort of looked at what's in it for each spot.
So the first thing that was apparent was the timing was very good, certainly from the UK side of things. With the status of the first arrays or farms that were going into the water being delayed, there was still opportunity through research to affect these and improve and give benefits to those. Also, at the same time, the test facilities, both at EMEC in Orkney and FORCE in the Bay of Fundy, were becoming available in line with our timelines for projects that might run.
And then, whereas in Canada, we're looking quite soon at the deployment of devices at both the larger scale projects as well as the community level developments. And we'll be looking at initial deployments that are both standalone devices and small arrays, so that array development is really very well aligned with what the UK is doing.
And in looking at some of the prioritisation work for research needs that Sheila was mentioning, we went through and compared the list with what the UK recognises as research needs, and we saw that there was a good understanding and sharing that the same barriers exist with the two countries, and that the same research needs are needed in certain areas. So why not work together? Why not do it as one thing?
And for us, that's driven by a need as well. We've got a very energetic site, the most energetic in the world. So not every technology or approach that's been used in other places is suitable for the Bay of Fundy. For instance, may not be able to. Well, we wouldn't send out divers to service equipment or be able to use visual capture for monitoring, or as we've experienced, might deploy some equipment and it has a very short lifespan, as in that it disappears, never to be found again. So what that drives is that we actually need to develop that new equipment, which we would hope to see be best in class and then be used worldwide.
And the key thing for me, for the UK side of things, was the opportunity for UK organisations to get into new markets. The Canadian tidal energy market is forecast to be really quite significant, and by creating new relationships and new collaborations, then it's a chance for those organisations to become part of that market.
And from our point of view, our industry, which includes quite a number of small and medium-sized enterprises, they, in being involved in tackling those research questions, that means that they are part of understanding the need and then also coming up with that, best-in-class solution. So are able to be in a position where we've got relationships and, potential market both for the projects that are in Canada and elsewhere.
And for both of us, we recognise what's the point in doing things twice. If tidal energy is going to be a successful industry, it needs to be a global industry. So let's bring industry together to work on the challenges as one rather than separately from one another. So looking at what we did, so the scope of the call, the competition that we ran was very much about how do we get better data. And that is data quality, data accuracy, data quantity for in-stream tidal energy. And that data could look at one of three areas. It could be resource assessments, so measuring the tidal flows, measuring the turbulence in the water. It could be environmental monitoring, so looking at the interaction of animals around turbines, sea mammals, diving birds, fish species. Or it could be operational data, so surveying, condition monitoring of devices, or long-term resource monitoring. And we wanted to see better data gathered through the development of innovative new sensor technologies. And crucially, recognising the commercial aspects of that, we wanted to see those technologies, those sensors put in water, tested in the real environment. Ultimately, the aim of all this was to reduce uncertainty, risk, and then cost for the industry. What was the prize for people wanting to be part of this? Well, we were offering funding of up to 1.4 million Canadian dollars. It's about £750,000 or €1 million. But there were some eligibility criteria around that we wanted to see certain consortia come together. And broadly speaking, we wanted, along with Innovate UK's purpose, we wanted each consortium to be business-led, to have a real business challenge in there. And we stipulated that each consortium must have a minimum of one Canadian and one UK business. And we wanted a true collaboration as well. So what we mean by that was something that was balanced. So no single organisation or country could have more than 75% of the total project costs. So how are we going to go about and do this? Well, quite often the commonplace for this is each organisation, so OERA and Innovate UK, would run their own assessment process, come up with two ranked lists, and then work out afterwards how on earth they were going to bring that together and choose which projects to fund. In the spirit of collaboration, we really wanted to have something that we agreed on and were bought into all the way, and we wanted a single assessment process. So fortunately, we discovered that Canada is within Europe, and certainly in the eyes of Eureka, so that is a European funding mechanism for running transnational calls. Canada is an associate member of that. So we're able to use EuroGEA, the energy cluster of Eureka, to run the calls for us. And they were very flexible and allowed us to come together and make a consolidated, coordinated approach without any third-party constraint. So they ran the calls for us, collected the data and did some independent assessment, which actually worked very, very well for us to get that single assessment process.
So as I'd mentioned, we were building on a number of years of back and forth trade missions, research missions. Some of those were built around the edges of conferences. Others would be standalone efforts. We had research exchanges, had joint participation in technical committees. Those would be global technical committees. So through that had developed very strong relationships. Our industry associations in Canada and particularly SDI, the Scottish Development International groups, were very active in building that. So we had a good feel for who might be interested in responding to this call. So went through some, but in addition, of course, went through some traditional channels for spreading the word about this research call. We wanted to really help to try to build this consortia and try to ensure that we did have some quality results, some proposals coming forward, and so to that end.
So how do you make people meet who maybe don't even know each other, have not met before? So with the distance involved, our usual means were not going to be enough. So we held an online brokering webinar whereby organisations from both sides of the Atlantic could pitch on their project ideas and skills and capabilities. And that was certainly very successful. There was quite a lot of interesting chat going on there, people making new relationships on the boards. We're also very fortunate that the International Conference on Ocean Energy was being held in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in the timelines of our call. So we're able to leverage the fact that there was already quite a large UK contingent of people going over for that conference to hold another consortia building, networking and pitching event, which was well attended. I think we had about 65 people on that. As a result of all this activity, we had 9 expressions of interest to our call. We were hoping for 10, so that was a pretty good return. 5 of them we invited to submit a full application, 4 of which have done so. And those 4 are at the very final stages of assessment at the moment. So in the coming weeks, days, there should be an announcement about the winners of that competition. So do look out on one of those websites for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.